All right, hello. It's time to talk about Arcane Mage in the War Within. I'm happy to say this is a little bit of a more fun topic than Frost was, and also, since this is the start of the expansion, I'm going to go into a little bit more depth at more basic core arcane things, and then we'll get into learning other hero talents, both of which change your playstyle. A little bit in some satisfying ways. I know Arcane has a history or stigma of being known as like a complex spec or something that's really hard to learn. I'm kind of hoping by the end of this video you're going to know that that's not true. Arcane should be pretty easy for everyone to learn, and in my opinion, at least in Dragonflight, it was the easiest spec for you to perform at a high level at. I think that's still close to true, kind of, but it has some reactionary things now that might make things difficult for people. But yeah, if you want to skip anywhere, check out the timeline below. And yeah, thanks for watching. So, many of you probably know Arcane has a couple different resources. We're actually going to skip past those right now, and I just want to talk about Arcane's kind of base rotation that you want to get into your head. So I'm going to pretend that, Arcane charges don't exist for a second. But for Arcane, its main proc that you get is called Clear Casting. And Clear Casting is the only way that you can use Arcane Missiles. It's not the only spell that Clear Casting benefits. You can also consume Clear Casting with an Arcane Explosion. However, right now, you will only ever use your Clear Casting. You can see all my Arcane Explosions glowing, so is my missiles. You will only ever use this buff on Arcane Missiles. And we have a talent called Nether Precision, where consuming Clear Casting increases the damage of your next two Arcane Blasts or Barrages by 20%. Okay, and again, we consume it by casting missiles. So I cast missiles, I have Nether Precision. Then I cast two Arcane Blasts to consume this and get my 20% damage amp. Okay, pretty good, right? If I don't have Clear Casting, I just cast Arcane Blast. Alright, again, we're looking at the base Arcane rotation at the moment. So you keep casting Arcane Blast until I get Clear Casting. And then once I get Clear Casting, I missiles, and then I Arcane Blast twice. Okay? And then I repeat it again. And hopefully you don't get less proc and get out of mana. But anyway, this is what our base rotation for Arcane looks like. You press Arcane Blast until you get the missiles, you press your missiles, and then you press Arcane Blast 2 more times. Okay? See? Missiles, and then Arcane Blast once, twice, and then I have nothing, so blast again. I get missiles, so I missiles, and then I keep Arcane Blasting. Okay? That's it. That's Arcane's base level rotation. Okay? That's going to change with your talents. But what you need to know is a lot of our rotation is based around consuming Nether Precision with Arcane Blast. Okay? Seems simple enough, right? Great. Now let's talk a little bit about Arcane's cooldowns. So Arcane's cooldowns don't actually change its rotation. You cast your cooldowns, but then you just still do, in base Arcane, you do the same thing I just told you, where it's missiles, blast, blast, missiles, blast, blast, missiles, right? But you do just cast them, and you cast them every 45 seconds, because our biggest CD is Arcane Surge, has a 1.5 minute cooldown, okay? And then Touch the Magi is a 45-second cooldown. Both these are just kind of damage increases. Surge does a little bit of damage to the enemy, but mainly it increases our mana regen by a bunch, and it's increases our spell damage by 35%. Whereas Touch the Magi is a debuff on the target, which is basically a 25% spell damage amp, but it also explodes in AoE at the end. Okay? So yeah. So we also have Evocate, which gives you a lot of mana. We don't actually use this for mana normally. At the start of a pull, you're going to use this for damage, alright? That might sound counterintuitive, but what ends up happening is that in a sustained situation, the next minute and a half, once you reach your next evocation, you are using it for mana, right? Because in a minute and a half, you're going to run out of mana. And that's just kind of how it works, is the first one you use for this intellect buff, which you can see in the second paragraph, and the clear casting, and you get that intellect buff while you're using your arcane surge and everything. And the second one will give you mana back, because we've been spending our mana for the last 1.5 minutes in the fight, okay? So when you see Arcane Surge and Evocate, those are tied together CDs. Every time before you Arcane Surge, you're going to Evocate, okay? That's pretty simple. And both give you a clear casting, so you're guaranteed to have that when you go into your cooldown. But for instance, Touch the Magi also is off GCD. Arcane Surge is casted. So Touch the Magi, since off GCD, you want to benefit in some way going into that. And so, the two ways you can do that are you can either Arcane Barrage into Touch the Magi. So I just Barrage Touch, right? While my Barrage is in the air because it's pretty slow travel time, I just Barrage Touch or something, right? If you do not have 4 Arcane charges, though, you're actually going to use Arcane Surge into Touch, but we don't need to worry about that for now. So with your opener here, normally you start at 0 Arcane charges, which we haven't talked about those yet, but the way you generate Arcane charges is either through Arcane Blast, Arcane Orb, or Arcane Explosion. If you ever have a preferred way to do it, it's always Arcane Orb. We're going to talk about that in a second, but for cooldowns, we're just going to start with our opener to generate Arcane charges. It can be an Arcane or Evocate, pre-Evocate, and then you would Arcane Blast, and then Orb, then you would Missiles, Arcane Surge. We're going to spend this Nether Precision stack on Barrage, and then we Blast, Touch the Magi, and then now we're doing our Blast, Barrage, Missiles. Or sorry, Blast, Missiles. Got ahead of myself. Blast, Missiles. Full channel that. Then here I Blast, Missiles, right? And this is what we're going to keep doing, okay? And you can see this is a continuation of our rotation that I showed you earlier. Again, base Arcane, just Blast, Missiles. And then normally I would Shifting Power at some point here. I'm going to ignore that for now, but that would make your mana regen a little bit easier. You can see I have 12 seconds till Touch the Magi, and so I'm kind of just waiting for that, and then I do the, ideally, Blast, or sorry, Barrage into Touch the Magi again, okay? So here, Touch the Magi is up, so I just Barrage, Touch, and then I keep doing my blasts, right? Blast, 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 Missiles, okay? And then pretty soon, Evocate's gonna go. And then at that point, I'm good. Here I ran out of mana, so Barrage. This is kind of what you do in your base version of Arcane, but yeah. There you go. And I'm about to get Evocate, and then I would Evocate here, and then in 9 seconds I would do my Missiles, Surge, Barrage, Touch again. Okay? But that is base Arcane. Alright, let's talk Arcane charges, I guess. So with Arcane charges, your Arcane Blast has a lower cast time and does far more mana, or far more damage, and consumes far more mana when you have more Arcane charges. Essentially, you can assume you really want to be at 4 Arcane charges a lot of the time, but that won't really be true in the Worth End because we're going to be barraging a lot more. But the way that you generate these Arcane charges is either through Arcane Orb. This is the most efficient way to do it because in single target this generates 2 Arcane charges for 1 GCD, and Arcane Blast has a really slow cast time when you have low Arcane charges. You're going to see it was 1.4 and it should just keep going down. It's not updating. You can see it'll go down. Anyway, but yeah, for Arcane Orb, this is the most efficient way for us to build Arcane charges. So if you're ever at 0, like you are now, you basically want to prioritize building with Arcane Orb. We also take a talent in our talent tree called High Voltage, where Arcane Missiles can give us Arcane charges. So Missiles is also a very effective way for you to generate Arcane charges, but you would rather Orb than Missiles if you're going to do it. And we'll get more into this once we get into the actual hero talents, but it's not that big of a deal. It's like if you don't have 4 Arcane charges, just press Arcane Orb or press Missiles, or if you can't do either of those, press Arcane Blast. Okay, so you're really just doing essentially a continuation of your default rotation of blast until you get Missiles, and then blast, and then Missiles, unless you can Orb. Then you would just Orb if you have less than 2 Arcane charges again. So you can see Arcane Blast has a 2.1 second cast time, which is going to be about 0.7 seconds slower than my GCD at the moment, which is why Arcane Orb is so efficient, because it gives double the Arcane charges for 0.7 seconds less time, and it also does more damage than this really low charge Arcane Blast. But yeah, so that's pretty much the basics of Arcane. You're at a basic level of understanding Arcane, of being able to play the spec. And in Dragonflight, that was essentially what we did, pretty close to. But now we're going to move on to hero talents, and I am going to start with Spellslinger. Sunfury is a massive amount ahead at the moment, but it is also very overtuned. So I wouldn't really, I would expect Spellslinger to probably pop up at some point this season. Even if it doesn't, if you don't like the Sunfury playstyle that we're talking about here, and you like Spellslinger, Spellslinger Arcane is on level with Spellslinger Frost in terms of damage, okay? And that is essentially at an even level with most other specs in the game. Okay, so Spellslinger Arcane, even though it's worse than Sunfury by the same amount, is not a bad spec. It's just Sunfury is super OP. So, yeah. What Spellslinger does, and Spellslinger Arcane is much better than Spellslinger Frost, even though it has a little bit less interactivity, is essentially when you consume your Nether Precision, right? The thing you get from clear casting, you're going to generate Arcane Splinters. And, once again, if you're in Arcane Surge, you're going to generate double Arcane Splinters, and when you're shifting power, you also generate Arcane Splinters. So it's going to change our priority a little bit. It's going to have us talk about something we haven't talked about before, which is how Barrage works. But yeah, that's essentially it. You consume Nether Precision, generate Arcane Splinters, you launch out a orb from your splinter damage, which is pretty nice. It's really good in AoE especially, but it's pretty nice in single target too. So you do have to be facing the boss a lot, and you do need to be a little bit aware of where the orb is going, kind of, but it shouldn't be that big of a deal. So because of how this is, where when you consume Nether Precision, you conjure 2 Arcane Splinters to fire your target, we can talk a little bit about how Barrage works. Barrage, its damage is actually calculated when it leaves my hands, okay? So it's not on impact or anything. And when you have Nether Precision, or buffs like Nether Precision that's on your character, or actually, anywhere, you can actually double dip on them, okay? So I can get 2 Arcane Blasts into here. If I can also get a Barrage. So I just generated 6 Arcane Splinters off of that Nether Precision because I did a Blast, and Barrage, right? Blast, Barrage. And I just generate 6 Arcane Splinters per. So when you're playing Spellslinger, that base rotation of Blast, Missiles, Blast, Missiles actually becomes Blast, Barrage. And then if you don't have charges back from that, you would Orb, Missiles, Blast, Barrage, right? So it changes a little bit, but not that much, right? It just, instead of Blast, Missiles, it's Blast, Barrage, Missiles, right? Again, this is entirely when you have Nether Precision. We're doing this around our Nether Precision buff, okay? You have 2 stacks, Blast, Barrage. You have 1 stack, Blast, Barrage, okay? It's the same thing, right? And this is important because a lot of times when you enter Touch the Magi, I'll show you here. When you enter Touch the Magi, right, so this is your opener, Missiles, Surge, Barrage, Touch. Now I only have 1 Nether Precision stack, so I want to Blast, Barrage, and then I have Missiles. Technically I should have orbed, actually. I'm at orb here anyway. And then you would Blast, Barrage, Missiles. And you would Blast, Barrage, Missiles. And then we would Blast, Barrage, Missiles, right? See? As Arcane, because you're casting so many more barrages here, you tend to get more clear casting, but once again, I get my missiles, I do my Blast, Barrage, I orb for my Arcane charges, and I go back to Arcane Blasting, right? Then here I missiles, I'm a full channel that, but we can talk about that later. Here I would technically have barraged earlier, that's okay. Yeah, I would touch, and then here I go Blast, Barrage. We're sad about our 0 Arcane charges, that's just what it is. But yeah, so you can see this is, kind of what your new base is going to be for Arcane. There's going to be more changes aside from, what I'm showing you in this showcase, but just give you an idea of that's your new, kind of rotation base where you do Blast, Barrage during your Nether Precision instead of just Blast. Okay? And that's important because Sunfury is different. All right. This is going to be your single target talent tree for Spellslinger. It's actually, this is your single target talent tree. This is your AoE talent tree. So, interesting, right? It's great. Oh, I just bugged it. Okay. But yeah, so you can just do that. and then you have AOE. Um, there's not really other choices you could make. You could do like something like this, in addition to it, to have 2 orb charges to have more consistent, orb generation in AOE, but it's not really, that it's not really better. It's very, very close, relatively. Like you lose a lot of single target and you kind of gain an okay amount of AOE, but yeah. This would be good if you want very consistent AOE. It's pretty nice. So personally, I may take this a little bit, but we'll see how it goes once I start actually running keys and everything. So, yep, that's it. AOE, single target, Spellslinger. All right, let's start talking about its single target priority. And here's our single target priority. Pretty simple. We're going to shifting power as Spellslinger. We actually want to do it in Arcane Surge when possible, or when essentially everything's on CD if it doesn't line up that way. This is because if you'll remember, Arcane Surge doubles the splinters we generate, and shifting power generates 8 splinters. So because of that, we want to use an Arcane Surge. We want to use Barrage queued on our second stack Nether Precision, right? You're going to missiles if you either have no Nether Precision or if you have 3 clear casting stacks, just so you don't overcap. We haven't talked about this yet, but every missiles class you're going to interrupt naturally, just by spamming a button, and I'll show you how to do that. So let's say I have missiles here. If I just buy missiles and I just spam Arcane Blast during it, that's just what you do. I just spam Arcane Blast during it. See? And that's it. And it just lets you get more Arcane Blast charges in, or casts in. But yeah, missiles, and then you spam Arcane Blast. The only time you don't is this. You can see my weak order glows green, but essentially every 3 times you consume clear casting, you get a mega buffed arcane missiles. It does 100% increased damage. And so this one, I don't want to interrupt. I just let fully channel, and then I go into my blast barrage, So, yeah. You just arcane orb, less than 2 arcane charges. If you can't do any of this above, you arcane blast, and if you can't do any of the above, you barrage. This is essentially when you run out of mana. It just isn't saying that. It's just saying that everything above here, if you can't do it, you barrage, and that just means you ran out of mana. Because if you can't Arcane Blast, you ran out of mana. So there's no real, this doesn't say use Arcane Blast with another precision, but that is what you do, because there's nothing else to spend it on, unless you run out of mana. So, pretty simple. Pretty simple. So let's do a full run of the single turret, and I'll show you what it looks like. Alright, so just a reminder, our opener is going to be an Evocate into a Missiles, which we cancel with an Orb, and then we Surge, Barrage Touch, Blast Barrage, Shifting Power, turn all these Splinters, our Orb because we have low charges, Missiles, and cancel that with the Blast Barrage, Missiles, Blast Barrage, Missiles. Full channel this one because it's our empowered one. Like Blast Barrage. Then we start blasting. Missiles, Blast Barrage, Orb. Gonna get to 4 charges really fast, and I Barrage Touch. Just keep blasting. Missiles, Blast Barrage. Got a little unlikely with arcane charges there, but that's okay. Full channel this. Then we Blast Barrage, Orb, Missiles, Blast Barrage. Missiles. Here would be a good time where I could evocate, because everything's just still on CD for quite a while. So, yeah. So we're going to do this. I'm actually going to re-missiles. I shouldn't have canceled that. It's okay. Barrage Touch, Blast Barrage, Missiles, Blast Barrage, Orb, Missiles, maybe Blast Barrage again, Missiles. You can see I haven't even had to think about mana at all this entire time, right? So this is definitely a spec that's good for not thinking about mana. Barrage here, Missiles, Orb, anyway. Blast Barrage. I shouldn't have Orb there. If I wanted to do it, I should have done it before the missiles, but that's okay. Blast, blast, barrage, missiles. Touch, missiles. So, this is, again, should have orbed there instead of the missiles, so it's okay. And then I just blast, blast, barrage. Then I can shifting power here, because everything's down. Missiles. Blast, blast, barrage. Orb. And there you go. That's Spellslinger's AOE. Doesn't seem too challenging, does it? Right? Seems like there's definite room for people to play it. It doesn't require a PhD. So this is a little bit more text, but I assure you it's not that hard. This basically boils down to when I have 4 arcane charges, I want a barrage. If I don't have 4 arcane charges, I want to orb. If I can't orb, then I missiles. That's it, really. There's a little bit more nuanced stuff. Your opener here is going to be the same as it is in single target, right? You would evocate missiles, orb, surge, barrage, touch, and then blast, barrage. It's exactly the same as your single target opener in Spellslinger, okay? So we want shifting power and surge, just like in single target ideally, or with evocate on CD. You're going to arcane orb if you have low arcane charges. Your arcane blast right after touch of magi. We'll get to that in a second. With barrage, it gets a little bit more complex here. It seems that way, but not really. You're going to do it, and there's going to be a couple towns we're going to talk about now, but if Arcane Tempo is about to fall off, or if you have your 4-piece buff with Nether Precision, I'm doing this on live, so not a 4-piece, but it essentially gives you all your Arcane charges back when you Arcane Barrage, so that's nice. Or you're going to do it in the combo with Arcane Blast, right? Because Arcane Blast Barrage, if you do that on 1 stack, that's going to give you double the splinters you should get from that. So that's just pretty high priority. Technically, you don't really need to treat this as like separate lines. We really just want a barrage with 4 arcane charges, or to keep tempo up. But yeah, with missiles, unlike in single target, we actually will use them consecutively if we need arcane charges, and we don't have arcane orb. Okay, so are they going to do it for Nether Precision? Or you're going to do it if you have less than 4 arcane charges, and you just keep repeating that if you still have clear casting. Then you barrage 4 arcane charges, and if you can't do anything above, you explosion. And we're never going to explosion with clear casting. So a couple of talents that we haven't talked about yet that need to be mentioned. First is Arcane Tempo. This says consuming arcane charges increases your haste. You actually don't have to consume them. You just have to barrage, and it gives you a stacking haste buff. So if this is ever about to fall off in AoE, you're going to want to barrage no matter what, just to keep it up. That's mainly because haste is really, really valuable for Arcane AoE. So yeah, it's also something you're going to do for Sunfury single turret. But anyway, the other thing is to mention why we are Arcane Blasting in AoE. Like, what the heck? We have this talent down here called Magi Spark. It's essentially causing our 45-second cooldown, Touch the Magi, to require us to cast 3 spells into it. It requires us to cast Arcane Barrage, it requires us to cast Arcane Blast, and it requires us to cast Arcane Missiles. And this does a bunch of damage. So normally, those 3 spells are going to naturally happen in your rotation, especially in single target. That's not true in AoE, obviously, because we just normally wouldn't cast Arcane Blast. So in this case, you will forcibly just cast Arcane Blast right after you touch. Most of the time, when you enter Touch the Magi, right, you're missilesing, and then you're going to Barrage Touch, and that's going to leave you at 1 Nether Precision stack, and then you can just blast Barrage, right? And you'll see that when I do the gameplay example, but it's pretty simple. So this might look a little tougher, but I promise you it's not going to be. And again, our opener is exactly the same as single target. Every time you enter a touch, you can just barrage, touch, blast as well. But yeah, barrage, touch, blast, barrage, basically. And then the one thing we haven't really mentioned, because it wasn't important, was orb barrage. So when you Arcane Barrage, you're just going to have essentially 40% chance to just shoot out an Arcane Orb. And Arcane Orbs generate Arcane charges, 1 for casting it, and 2 for hitting enemies. And when you're in AoE, you're going to hit, presumably, 3, 4 enemies. In that case, you can just barrage again. You don't need to do anything else between your barrages. So yeah, Arcane Orb makes it so that you can have segments where you're just casting barrage, 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 because you keep proccing the orb. Of course, if you look at our priority list, we actually have missiles with clear casting when Nether Precision is down above barrage. Right, so if you are chaining your barrages, you actually want to take a break in missiles and then barrage, just so you're doing it with another precision buff. Okay. So, yeah. Yeah. Um, yeah. And again, with missiles, we're going to interrupt it unless you have the Aether Attunement buff, which we talked about earlier here. But yeah, so let's get into an example. I think Arcane AOE is very fun, in my opinion. Additionally, with the opener, when you evocate missiles, orb, surge, barrage, touch, you ideally, if you could save your orb, that would be nice. For burst purposes or for opener purposes, it's good to use it. But for instance, a lot of time when a tank is grouping in Think Plus, you have the time to just Arcane Explosion while the mobs are being grouped, and then you don't actually even need to orb, because you weren't going to burst right away if your tank's running around for 15 seconds grouping mobs. So you can build your 4 Arcane charges and then have your orb to rely on if you don't get procs inside your burst for higher numbers. Okay. Anyway, let's get started. Now we surge, we're going to barrage, touch, blast, barrage. Now we missiles, barrage, barrage, barrage. I should go into shipping power, should have done it a little earlier, that's okay. Then we're going to orb, barrage, barrage. Technically I should missiles here, barrage. Now we explosion, barrage, barrage. Missiles, not going to interrupt it because it's the big one, barrage. Now explosion because you don't have clear casting. Barrage, barrage. And then here, I'm going to, oops, that's okay. Kind of messed up the timing there a little bit, but yeah. There I should have missiles before my barrage, really, but it's fine. Just for the buff. Here I kind of slowed down a little bit. You can see I don't really need to care about the arcane tempo thing. So, barrage, orb, barrage, barrage, explosion. I'm not going to channel my shipping power, because here I need charges, so I ignored my other precision. Maybe surge, barrage, touch, blast, barrage, missiles, barrage. Barrage again because another precision. Missiles, barrage, barrage, still another precision. Barrage, missiles here, generate another precision. Orb because I have less than 2. Barrage, and I should have shifting powered inside that surge. I'm pretty bad about it. But yeah, a way to remember that is just you're supposed to shifting power really after your barrage and your surge, but I'm still getting used to that. You can see it's got a nice flow to it, and especially with the fact that your splinters can generate arcane orbs, you really have a pretty fun time in Spellslinger AOE as arcane, so it's pretty nice. Definitely recommend giving it a go. But yeah, there you have it. That's it for Spellslinger, and now we move on to the Giga spec of Sunfury. I'll probably put something on the screen for earlier, but for shifting power in Spellslinger, you actually do it in Touch the Magi or in Surge, or if Evocate's almost over. So you would cast in your mini burn as well if it's available. And you also cast in like a time anomaly proc Arcane Surge. But anyway, moving on to Sunfury, here we have our single target priority. There's going to be a couple new keywords that we haven't talked about here yet, but we'll get to them. Okay, so this is going to be our single target priority, and the main new things we have is Arcane Soul and Burden of Power that we want to look at. And if we look at Sunfury, what you want to look at here is that every 6 times you cast Blast or Barrage, you're going to generate a sphere, and generating that sphere increases the damage next Blast or Barrage by 30%. When you look at this, what should stand out to you is this is the same wording, essentially for the later half of the sentence, as another precision. It increases the damage of your next Arcane Blast or Barrage by 20%, right? So in this case, just like how Spellslinger was super focused on every nether precision, we're going to blast, barrage, and get our triple use of splinters, right, from their nether precision. Sunfury is focused on burden of power. It does the basic missiles, blast, missiles, blast, right? And the only time you're going to barrage actually is going to be focusing on the burden of power. kind of in your default rotation. So when you have Burn Power, you want to Blast plus Barrage, just like how with Spellslinger does Blast plus Barrage on the last stack of Nether Precision. Even as Sunfury, you actually don't have to worry at all about your Arcane charges in this situation, because if you consume Burn of Power, it just gives you 4 Arcane charges from your Barrage. So whenever you Blast Barrage this, you're just going to have full Arcane charges still, and you can continue with the normal rotation of just Arcane Blasting. Arcane Soul happens when Arcane Surge ends, and based on the number of spears you entered Arcane Surge with, you get an Arcane Soul for a certain number of seconds, with the max being 5 seconds. And what this does is it makes your Arcane Barrage just generate 4 Arcane charges, and then also give you clear casting. So in this case, if you have the haste for it, you would ideally get to 3 clear casting by barraging. And then you would spend your clear casting and then barrage. So it's actually just only an Arcane Soul. So your missile with 3 clear casting and then barrage. But yeah, and that's it. That's it. So you're doing your core rotation being blast, missiles, blast, missiles until you get Burn of Power, and you do blast, barrage. When you're doing your Arcane Soul, you just can barrage till you get 3 clear casting. If you can fit in a missiles barrage, you do that. If you can't, you just barrage again. And then your opener is actually going to be a little bit different, because we don't take high voltage, right? We don't take this. So it's really hard for us to get to, it's not worth really to get to 4 Arcane charges in our opener because of that. So instead, you're going to do this, where you just evocate missiles, and then you're going to surge and Q touch at the end of surge, and then blast bust. Yeah, blast bust missiles, not brush. Sorry. That was for AoE. Yeah, and then if you ever take high voltage, in AoE and cleave, you're going to do the Spellslinger opener. Okay, so here we go. Single target, blast missiles. But yeah, okay, let's get into that. So with our current haste, if you don't have Lust, I don't have Lust, you can't really barrage inside touch on your opener, so just get Arcane Lust twice first. But normally just evocate missiles, surge, touch, blast missiles. If I had 4 Arcane charges, I actually would have barraged, but I didn't really have 4 Arcane charges, so blast, barrage, and then blast. Here, I'm worried about, because my low haste, fitting the last barrage of, yeah, blast barrage, missiles, need shifting power after my Arcane Surge ended, barrage this, missiles, blast missiles, blast barrage, missiles. Yeah, not too bad, huh? Especially in AoE, your barrage can hit very hard as well. Yeah, it's a lot sometimes. That's okay. It's okay to just sit on my clear casting sometimes and go into my shifting power, since that's what you want to do when your Arcane Surge is over. Or your Arcane Soul, sorry. Yeah, this is the easy part of Sunfury, the single target rotation. So you can see it's just something you can learn, get used to. I'm doing it a lot better now than I was at the start of this, really. And then, yeah, you go and do another surge and everything. So there you go. You just be barraging a little bit more often. with your 4-piece, right? With that precision. But other than that, that should have been a pretty good showcase for you. Alright, I believe we mentioned this earlier, but this is Sunfury's AOE Talents, just the exact same as Spellslingers. And this is Sunfury's AOE Priority. You might know something. It looks very similar to our single target priority. So yeah, Sunfury is very weird. You're going to do, you're basically doing your single target in AOE, which is strange, but this is the way the rotation works. So this is what we're going to be doing. This might, I don't know if this will phase out or anything. But you would just generate like almost no spheres really if you only were doing a barrage focus build, and you'd have a lot worse single target. So this is kind of why we're focusing on this. It's just good for like medium target counts really. I'm sure there's probably going to be a different meta that rises if people are playing Arcane in really high keys, but this is the AoE rotation we have for now, so that's what we're going to talk about. All right. Okay, so the changes that have happened when we're looking at AoE are you're going to blast barrage on one nether precision stack, similar to Spellslinger, but only if you have a way to get your charges back, which is from orb or clear casting. You're blasting with nether precision still. Here, you're also going to missiles for arcane charges if you need them. You're going to arcane explosion on specifically 0 arcane charges, and yeah, that's it. So yeah. This is optimized a little bit for funnel. You can read Wowhead if you want. Porum's the guy that does most of the arcane simcraft. So, a lot of this is kind of a bit optimized for funnel. So, you can definitely do more damage if you were to probably ignore this condition and just start barraging instead with all your stuff and explosioning to build. But yeah, I assume it's mostly this and these 3 conditions that would be the ones that you would remove if you wanted to just do more AoE damage. You kind of transition towards the Spellslinger playstyle, but yeah. Let's get into this. Again, your opener is going to be this, right? That's what your opener is going to be. So we'll give it a shot. Here we go again. Just remember, we're only barraging with Arcane Soul, Burden of Power, 1 stack of Nether Precision, or our 4-piece. Okay. So Evocate. I'm just going to go ahead and Orb for fun. Missiles, Proc Arcane Surge, we ignore that. So I Surge, Barrage, Touch, Blast, Barrage, Missiles. Then here I just Blast, Missiles, Blast, Barrage. Barraging a few times here. I'm not confident I can do anything extra, so I'm just going to barrage during that. I'm going to blast, barrage, or shifting power. Blast, barrage into touch, missiles. Here we blast, barrage. I'm going to spend it on the AoE missiles just because I don't really need to orb technically. Blast, barrage, missiles. Here we're going to blast, barrage into orb. I'm at missiles. Blast, barrage, missiles. Blast, barrage, missiles. That's pretty unfortunate. I only got 1 charge. I have to burn power there, which is weird. So, strange interaction, but that's what we do. Here I will blast barrage, evocate. We're going to missiles. Then I'm going to surge, barrage touch. Here we blast barrage, orb, missiles. Blast, barrage, missiles. Or blasting, missilesing, blasting. I could definitely have spent that clear casting, but that's okay. Just gonna do this. Blast barrage, shipping power, missiles into our touch of magi, missiles, barrage touch, blast barrage, and missiles. Oops, that should have been a blast barrage, that's okay. The blast barrage, missiles, blast barrage again, except clear casting. Here I'm just gonna blast. Oh, now I got burden. Missiles. Here I have orbs, so I can blast, barrage. It's okay, because I procced my burden. Here though, I blast, barrage, orb, missiles, blast, barrage, evocate, missiles, nice surge, barrage touch, blast barrage, missiles again, and blast barrage, missiles, blast barrage, orb, missiles, and then I'm doing Arcane Soul. I can probably fit the missiles in here, maybe. Yeah, looks like it. Good. I'm in surge, but I do want to channel this. Maybe blast barrage touch, missiles, blast barrage, and then I shouldn't have worked. But yeah, you get the idea. That was good. Most of that was good. All right, so that's Arcane Sunfury AOE for you. It takes a little bit getting used to when you're used to actual Arcane or standard Arcane AOE. Spellslinger is a little bit more intuitive, I would say, probably. But again, Sunfury is basically your single turret rotation, so that might be easier for people who are new to Arcane. And it does a lot more funnel damage at the cost of some AoE damage. So, there's probably be something popping up later in the season from high-end plus pushers where they're all about that AoE damage that you can go ahead and copy. But this is what we've got going forward from the APL and everything. This is how your characters can be simmed. So yeah, in terms of weak auras, you need a burner power weak aura, you need another precision weak aura. I like my Aether Attunement one. I have it in 2 places with this icon or with green, my green clear casting. Normal clear casting doesn't actually show you its stacks on the proc. It used to in Legion. That's what my weak aura does, that I copied from someone else, really. So that's also nice to have as well. Arcane Surge is an okay way of tracking when you're going to get Arcane Soul by the time it ends, and I would recommend having this last GCD and Arcane Soul weak aura. But if you want a more reliable way, sometimes the way you get Arcane Soul is actually when your Phoenix goes away, not when your Surge goes away. So that can sometimes be a little weird, and Poorworm has a really good tracker for that in his weak aura package. Personally, I'm probably just going to use Arcane Surge because I'm lazy. But maybe I'll extract his weak aura if things get a little strange later on. But yeah, there's a really good Orb Barrage proc weak aura, which is great if you're playing Spellslinger. You want to play standard Arcane AoE, where it just tells you procced Orb Barrage, time to press Barrage again. It just tells you earlier than you would have to notice, so it just helps with your reactions a lot. So yeah. Poorworm's kind of, if you haven't noticed, the Giga Chad for Arcane. He's active a lot in the Mage Discord if you want to talk to him. I'm also pretty active in the Mage Discord. So he's a great person to ask questions to, assuming you've kind of read things. But yeah, if you have any questions, leave them down below. Oh, Arcane's tier set is 4% single turret AoE. You can check out the percentages on Mage Hub if you really want. It's lower than Frost. Frost is 5% in single target, 12% AoE. But Arcane does, yeah, I mean, Arcane will just absolutely trash on Frost, regardless in DPS. So, it doesn't really matter. So don't be too sad. Your tier set feels pretty good to play with this Arcane too. So yeah. All right. Have a good rest of your day.